Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Samsolo33 here, and welcome to my show about Pokemon TCG Back to Reality, where we get straight to the good stuff and forget all that stupid rogue deck nonsense that you're so tired of. And today we're going to be talking about one of the new archetypes from Flashfire, that is the Charizard EX set with the Combustion Blast. Charizard, this is a deck I've been testing since the release of Flashfire, and it's definitely one of the more interesting decks. It definitely is kind of its own little thing in this format, and I really do enjoy, at least I do enjoy playing this deck. As for how good it is, well then, you're just going to have to watch and find out. Charizard has been kind of the laughingstock of the TCG ever since its release. All of its incarnations did absurd amounts of damage, but cost way too much energy to use. Even going back to base set, Charizard was virtually useless, as much as we didn't want it to be. I guess it was time for some change though, because this new Charizard is definitely not bad. It does still have a really high energy cost though, but you know, baby steps. Charizard EX's main draw is its second attack, Combustion Blast. It does 150 damage for 2 fire and 2 colorless, and you can't use Combustion Blast next turn. Now, 150 damage is normally a pretty bad amount of damage to deal, but with a Muscle Band, that can hit for a whopping 170 damage, enough to KO most EXs in the format. But then of course there's the other problem, the energy cost. Getting Vora energy onto a Pokemon is quite a feat. You could use Emboar, but Rayquaza EX is just so much better at doing what Charizard can do, since it can deal more than 170 and doesn't need a Muscle Band. But there are 2 cards from the Flashfire set that make Charizard much better than just okay. The first one is Blacksmith, a supporter that attaches 2 fire energy from your discard to one of your fire Pokemon. The second is Fiery Torch, which is an item that lets you discard a fire energy from your hand and draw 2 cards. These cards combo so well with each other, since you can discard energy with Fiery Torch, then attach them to Charizard with Blacksmith. Since no evolutions are required to do this, with a little help from double colorless energy, you can use Combustion Blast on the first turn you can attack. Although it is difficult, I have seen it happen before. Even if it's not the first turn or the second turn, being able to do this at any point in the game with any board position is a very scary thought. You also don't have to worry about not drawing cards on the turns you use Blacksmith because you have Fiery Torch. So the big perks of this deck are how fast, powerful, and spontaneous it can be. Its big weakness is consistency. But since this concept doesn't really require that much space, you can fill the rest of your list with cards to help make it more consistent. Let's take a look at a basic deck list for Charizard EX. We have 4 Charizard, since it's your main attacker, and really, your only reliable attacker in this deck. Well, at least in this list. 2 Druddigon, since Charizard can't really deal with Black Kyurem that reliably. Keldeo EX is here to help out with the drawback of Combustion Blast. Using Rush In and Retreating with a Float Stone will get rid of that effect, and will allow you to use Combustion Blast to your heart's content. Jirachi is truly incredible in this deck. Being able to Stellar Guidance for Blacksmith makes that card much more reliable, especially if you're using an Ultra Ball to get Jirachi. You can discard Fire Energy with that, then use Blacksmith to get them right back. It's also, as always, just a great way to up your consistency without adding too many more supporters. Electrode is also a really nice card in this deck. Along with Fiery Torch, it's a great way to continue drawing cards without playing a supporter. N can also be really painful for this deck if played at the wrong time, and Electrode is the king of getting you cards you need after an N to 1. For the supporters, we only have 12, 8 if you don't count Blacksmith. Since we have so much draw power with Fiery Torch, Jirachi, Electrode, and Bicycle, running 13 to 14 supporters really isn't much better than 8. As just mentioned, I run Bicycle in this deck as well. Even though I just made a video all about how much I hate Bicycle, I actually like it in this deck. It's, again, another way to draw cards without using your supporter. You also have Electrode and Jirachi to fall back on if you draw into total crap. Muscle Band is essential in this deck for getting one-hit KOs, so having 4 really is nice and consistent. Lysandre is good for applying pressure if your opponent is laying back, not attacking you. If your opponent is applying early pressure, you should be attacking their active, since it has the energy on it, obviously. If they're laying back, you should have plenty of time to set up your Charizards and fish out their threatening stuff with Lysandre once you're ready. The one Hypnotoxic Laser may seem weird, but you may have noticed I haven't mentioned anything about Pokemon with 180 HP. With Muscle Band and Hypnotoxic Laser, you can knock out those Pokemon in one hit. It is a little inconsistent, but if your opponent has a lot of 180 HP Pokemon, it's bound to get you at least one KO. With this deck, you always want to get the fastest start possible, which is why Computer Search is definitely the best A-Spec for this deck. My energy line is 8 Fire, 4 DCE, and 3 Letter. Letter is nice to get multiple fire energy in your hand for Fiery Torch and Ultra Ball, but you don't want to burn, pun intended, through all of your fire energy early on, which is why I still run 8 Fire and only 3 Letter. So there's the deck list. As I said earlier, the deck's strengths are speed, power, and needing next to no setup. The deck is actually very solid. Dealing 170 damage turn 1 or 2 isn't really that hard, honestly. And not that many decks can really deal with that constant pressure. Its big problem is setting up the next Charizard, and the next Charizard. If you're caught without a Charizard for a couple turns, it's going to be an uphill battle. But if your opponent struggles to KO your first Charizard, you can easily destroy them before they get a chance to set up. If you have 2 Charizards with Muscle Bands and an Electrode in play, N won't exactly make a comeback possible against this deck. It also has the issue of Pyroar. Yeah, you literally can't hurt it at all. But that doesn't mean you can't tech for it though. Speaking of techs, I'm going to talk about them right now. Let's get those Pyroar counters out of the way first, since it's fresh in your mind. First is Mega Kangaskhan EX. Yes, Megas are evolutions too. It can one-shot Pyroar for 3 Carless and a Muscle Band, or without the band if you flip heads on Wham Bam Punch. The reason you would play Mega Kangaskhan over some random Water-type Stage 1 is because Kangaskhan is bulky. One Kangaskhan can take out 2 or even 3 Pyroar, whereas this Beartick here would get KO'd by some random other attacker they're running, and they'd simply send up another Pyroar and lock you again. Kangaskhan is also very space efficient, only needing a 1-1 line. You can go up to a 2-2 line if you're afraid of one piece of it getting prized, which would basically make any Pyroar matchup an auto win. There's also Raichu. While Raichu has really low HP, and can easily be KO'd by Pyroar, it's not a Mega, so you don't have to waste a turn evolving into it. And it's, well, Raichu. It's got that trademark lightning type that's so good against Yveltal EX and Lugia EX, so if you're having trouble against either of those decks, Raichu might be better than Mega Kangaskhan, although it doesn't counter Pyroar nearly as well. But if you're playing a 2-2 or 3-3 line, it should be able to take out 2 or 3 Pyroars respectively. The final one is Ninetales with Hypnotoxic Laser and Burbank. Either if you flip heads on Laser, or if you flip tails, you just need a Burbank and a Muscle Band to KO Pyroar. Not only does playing Ninetales give you that catcher effect with Bright Look, but Laser and Burbank makes Charizard able to deal 180 damage much easier. Ninetales is also just a really solid non-EX attacker to force your opponent to take 7 prizes. Ninetales does give this deck a lot more versatility, but that does take up a lot of space, which ruins this deck's already poor consistency in dealing 170 damage early on, which is really its only big perk. If you're willing to sacrifice some consistency, I think a Ninetales line could add a lot more to this deck than just the Pyroar counter. There are a few other good inclusions to this deck that I'll quickly go over. First up is Reshiram. Reshiram is just a nice non-EX attacker that can one-shot Safeguard Pokemon, and you can even use blue flares in succession with Blacksmith. The main perk of Reshiram that Druddigon doesn't already have is that Reshiram is more proactive. If your opponent has a Safeguard Pokemon out, they can just not knock out any of your Pokemon, then if you ever drop down a Druddigon, they can bring it to the active and knock it out with something else. Reshiram also does a good amount more damage than Druddigon, which can come in handy for taking out 120 to 140 HP Pokemon. If you know you're going to be running into a lot of Safeguard Pokemon at a tournament, Reshiram is very good at countering them. Mewtwo EX is also a common tech to include in this deck. Deoxys EX is annoying for Charizard, and Mewtwo is good at dealing with Deoxys. It's also just a nice, cheap attacker, and this deck doesn't actually have one of those, so Mewtwo's definitely not a bad card in this deck. Then there's Victini EX. Turbo Energized is a great attack to use when you don't have enough energy to use anything else. Early on you want to be using Combustion Blast, but mid to late game, if you don't have a Charizard after your first one goes down, Victini can be good for setting up another one. It is a little bit of a liability because of its 110 HP, but Jirachi is already an even bigger liability, so your opponent is going to need a lot of catcher effects for both of them to give up 2 prizes. For our first trainer card, we have Roller Skates. It's another item that can draw you cards, but I decided not to include it in my list because of that annoying coin flip. If you can flip heads on Roller Skates, you can get yourself a pretty huge hand, and a lot of cards to work with. If you flip tails, well, we don't like to talk about what happens when you flip tails. Even ignoring that, Bicycle can often draw you just as many cards, so drawing 3 really isn't that good of an effect. Don't get me wrong, this card is good when you flip heads, but it's not the most super amazing, ridiculous, overpowered thing in the world or anything like that. I guess Electrode is good to fall back on if you flip tails, but early game you can really be caught on some bad spots if you flip tails. And for our final good addition, we have Pokemon Catcher. Lysandre can be a little unreliable, since sometimes you want to use a Blacksmith on the same turn you want to use Lysandre. But with Catcher, you can play it anytime you want. Similar to the last card we talked about, it, of course, comes down to a coin flip. As I said when talking about Lysandre, if you really need to power up another Charizard, it's likely because your previous Charizard was knocked out. And if that's the case, the thing you want to attack is likely the thing your opponent just used to KO your Charizard, so you won't often want to use Blacksmith and Lysandre on the same turn. But if you find that coming up a lot, Catcher isn't that bad to play. There are 2 other variants of this deck I want to talk about, but the lists are basically the same as the first one, so I'll just talk about the concept and say what cards to take out. The first alternate variant is Mega Charizard EX. It actually gives a lot of perks to Charizard when you think about it. It can knock out 180 HP Pokemon, or 230 HP Pokemon for that matter. It gives the deck an answer to Pyroar, and I'm sure there's some other things I can't even think of right now. It does cost a lot more energy than other Pyroar counters, but Pyroar is so slow that you'll usually have 4 energy on your Charizard by the time you start powering up your Pyroar counter anyway. Since you're playing Mega Charizard Y, you're going to also need some protection cubes, so your Charizard doesn't immediately die, which is actually the worst part about this card in my opinion. It can easily be tool scrappered away, and attacking without a protection cube is just suicide. And if you already have a muscle band on your Charizard, you can't attach the protection cube. It's just overall a big pain, but the benefits may outweigh the costs. You could play Mega Charizard EX instead, since Dark Energy are easier to get out and harder to discard than Protection Cube, and it has a different weakness than the regular Charizard. But there are some issues with this card. The 5 discard is incredibly painful. It can very easily deck you out if you have to use the attack too many times, especially since this deck goes through cards way faster than most decks. You also can't Blacksmith onto a Charizard X, since it's not a fire type, so you would really need to get those energy onto your Charizard before evolving. The lower HP, worse weakness, and painful drawbacks of Protection Cube may be deal breakers for some, but the discard from Wild Blaze makes X nearly unplayable in my opinion. From the list, I would take out a Laser, a Lysandre, a Druddigon, and a Muscle Band for 2 Charizard Y and 2 Protection Cube. The other variant is Pyroar. Since it's a fire type, it gets all the same support Charizard does, and they complement each other pretty well. You can hide behind Pyroar when you don't have a Charizard set up, and Pyro decks usually don't have a reliable way to deal massive damage or apply early pressure, which Charizard is perfect for. Pyroar is also very good against a couple of Charizard's bad matchups. To fit in a 2-2 Pyroar line, I would take out the Laser, a Lysandre, a Druddigon, and a Letter. And now it's time to look at the matchups for this deck. You might actually be surprised at a couple of these. Yveltal Darkrai is a slightly favorable matchup. Charizard is very good at out-aggressing Yveltal. If they just dump all their energy onto their active Yveltal, you can come in out of nowhere and Combustion Blast their Yveltal. Yveltal can KO Charizard pretty easily, since it costs 4 energy, but Charizard can pretty easily KO Yveltal as well. Darkrai is actually pretty annoying for you, since it has 180 HP, which is difficult for Charizard to reach. The Laser can help out with that, but it isn't very consistent. Pyroar basically walls the entire deck, and Mega Charizard can be kind of helpful, but you may be better off with the consistency. Yveltal Garbodor is actually even to slightly favorable. From what I've seen, this is pretty much the deck to beat right now, so having a slightly favorable matchup is a very nice attribute of this deck. The matchup plays out pretty much the same as the straight Yveltal matchup, except you don't have Keldeo, Jirachi, or Electrode, but you can deal with it. Pyroar is virtually useless, but can come in handy in certain situations. Mega Charizard is pretty much the same as the Yveltal matchup. All Plasma variants are pretty unfavorable matchups. For the Lugia version, it's very difficult to one-shot Lugia, and even though Charizard has 180 HP, it's easy to soften up with Thundurus EX or Frozen City, since you have no counter stadium for it. Deoxys also eats up Charizard, but at least Charizard can one-shot them back. I don't even need to say why you lose to the Kyurem variant. Pyroar can single-handedly beat their deck as long as they're not running a counter to it. Mega Charizard is nice since it can survive a hit from Lugia EX. Just hope they're not running Snorlax. Virizion Genesect is pretty much an auto-win. Not only can Virgin not deal with tons of early pressure, but you're also Fire-type. Even if they get a G-Booster off or something, you can pump out your attackers much faster than they can. Enhanced Tamer may cause an issue on rare occasions, but you can just replace that DCE with another one, or just play a Blacksmith. Pyroar helps, Mega Charizard is just clutter, but it's not like it matters. Blastoise is about even. Keldeo does easily one-shot Charizard, but Charizard can one-shot Keldeo. Druddigon can also one-shot Blackhyurem, so it really just comes down to which deck draws better. Charizard is just a tad bit more likely to get the second turn attack, so I think it has the advantage here. But if Blastoise gets the first hit in, making a comeback is going to be difficult. Pyroar can be good to lure out their only Blastoise and kill it, and Mega Charizard can one-shot Blackhyurem, but it's still weak to water, so it will easily be killed by Keldeo. Mega Charizard X would definitely be better in this matchup. Raybor is a much easier matchup than Blastoise. You can use Charizard or Druddigon to KO Rayquaza EX, and Delphox is hardly a threat to Charizard, since they need 7 energy to one-hit KO it. Pyroar isn't that helpful because of Delphox, and Mega Charizard can still be one-shot by Rayquaza EX, so most of the time evolving into it is just a waste of a turn. Aromatisse Mega Kangaskhan, with or without special energy, isn't a favorable matchup. Mega Kangaskhan can easily be max potioned every time it gets hit by Charizard, and Wham Bam Punch can actually one-hit KO you. Well, about 40% of the time. Yveltal EX is also an easy finisher for them. Your only hope is to kill any Spritzes and Aromatisse that come down, and hope to outpower the rest of their deck. Pyroar is next to useless, and Mega Charizard is very useful. It actually makes the matchup a lot better, since it can one-shot Mega Kangaskhan very easily. This is a matchup where Y's weakness is better than X's, since Fairy types can KO X. Pyroar Flareon, or any other Pyroar variant, is not a favorable matchup, unless you have a tech for it. You can target out Litlios early on with Wing Attack Muscle Band, but once a Pyroar comes active, you're screwed, unless you have enough Lysandre left to get your last few prizes. With a 1-1 Kangaskhan line, it turns into a slightly favorable matchup. I haven't tested any of the other techs, sadly. Pyroar can help against other Pyroar decks, but only to a certain extent. And Mega Charizard is quite helpful in the matchup, since you have two 220 HP monsters that can KO Pyroar easily. As you can see, Charizard definitely has its positive matchups. It has one of the best Yveltal Garbodor matchups in the format, and any of the matchups you want to be fixed can be by either Pyroar or Mega Charizard. It really can adapt to any metagame you desire. And even without any techs, most of its matchups are pretty even. It only has a couple really bad matchups, but again, they can all be teched for. Its amazing speed and lack of needing a setup are what makes Charizard a strong contender in the format. Now that this card has been released, I don't think we're allowed to say that all Charizard cards suck ever again. And I hope you all enjoyed today's Pokemon TCG Back to Reality episode. Of course, if you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a comment down below saying you liked it, or if you disliked it, or if you want to tell something else about it, or just give it a thumbs up or thumbs down if you want to save some time. My next video, I have no idea what my next mix-up or Back to Reality is, so I apologize, but something may be coming up soon. Of course, there's the Pokemon TCG National Championships coming up in less than a month. It's the weekend of July 4th, I don't remember the exact date, but I will be there in the Masters Division. If you see me, feel free to say hi. I may or may not be wearing my Pikachu hat that I usually wear. So yeah, this Pikachu hat is the one I'm talking about. I might be wearing it, may not be wearing it. I'll try to. Hey, I'll wear this, you know. Helps people find me. If you're looking for me, feel free to say hi. I always love chatting with my fans. You know, great to see you guys. Really do appreciate all you do for me, all the views I get from you guys, and all the feedback and praise I get from these videos, which is really, I have been getting a lot more of this recently, so I thank you all very much for all your support and viewing my videos. So yeah, that's it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for more Pokemon TCG content in the future. Later.